And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Billy Musio and Bradley Stalder here for the Fantasy Football Fanalists. And tonight we have another guest. Tonight's guest began his fantasy sports career when he started playing fantasy baseball at the age of 12. That led him to fantasy football at the age of 15. And thanks to fantasy basketball, he's been playing fantasy sports year-round since 1995. He claims he may even win a league one of these years. He is also a 21-time award-winning broadcaster, host and producer of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour podcast. He is the media coordinator for the FFPC, which you've heard us talk about several times on this podcast, and a contributor to the RotoViz and FNTSY Sports Network. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to tonight's guest, Eric Balkman, also known as Balky.
Well,
Balky.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on. I hope I can live up to that intro. I usually fall flat on my face when I get, I get the pro wrestler intro where it takes half a year to introduce the guy and then the fight at lasts for 30 seconds. Hopefully I fare a little bit better than that tonight.
well, we're happy to have you on.
Yeah, it's we're so excited here. We've talked to FFPC all year round here on the Fanalist podcast. We're a fairly new podcast, but I'm not new to FFPC. I really started playing, the tournaments the last few years here and have done a lot of high stakes, like with friends and stuff, but just started really playing seriously on FFPC in the last couple of years and excited to pick your brain here tonight and get some of your thoughts on the FFPC and to get to know you a little bit more as well. Well,
I'm an open book, gentlemen. So ask away.
Perfect, because the whole podcast is about questions. So we've set it up perfectly to fit. So we're excited. We're thankful that you're able to answer those. And Eric, we looked at your Twitter, and like the first thing I noticed was Leon Phelps. Like, who is Leon Phelps?
I switch my Twitter. Like, I don't switch my handle. My handle is always at Eric Balkman, but I switch my name. You can switch the name on Twitter. I do that every so often. I love, like, we'll get into hobbies later on, but I love comedy and comedic films, television, comedic art. Like I've always been a big fan of that. So anytime I'm working late or whatever, I'll throw on an old SNL or an Office or a Seinfeld or something like that. And a name will stick with me. And I'll just change my name to that on Twitter for a year or for 6 months or whatever it is. And I just happen to be rolling in the aisles watching an old Tim Meadows ladies man sketch on SNL where he was Leon Phelps, the ladies man. This was like a couple months ago, and I just changed it to Leon Phelps. So currently I'm on Twitter as Leon Phelps. And I always like that too. When, you like something or retweet something, you'll get the notification. Oh, Leon Phelps liked this tweet, or Leon Phelps retweeted your tweet. And who the hell is Leon Phelps? And then you go check out the Twitter profile and see, oh, it's this crazy nut job. I got it.
Yeah, I was thrown off. I'm not going to lie. I was like, Leon Phelps? Like, no, that's Eric Balkman. What's going on here?
It's great, too, when you tweet at, not that I tweet at businesses, but sometimes I'll DM a business that I'm, interacting with, and they'll reply back, "Hi, Leon. Thank you for," and I'm like, who the hell is Leon? Oh, that's right. My name's Leon Phelps right now.
That's when you kind of know there's spammers too, because you just have to sift through those.
Oh, yeah.
The automated, hello, Leon. All right, red flag immediately.
Yep, exactly.
So
and blocked. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So, Eric, you do a lot for the FFPC, and you've been pretty involved in that. What is your current day job, and is fantasy football like the primary job for you right now?
It's not, and I'm not talented enough in the industry to make it my full-time job. I actually have 3 jobs, fellas. My day job, my 40-hour-a-week job, I work for an e-commerce website doing some digital marketing and customer service for them. That's my primary job. I would say fantasy football is probably second. My duties with the FFPC, hosting the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, hosting and producing the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and doing various appearances on SiriusXM. That's probably my secondary job. My third job, I actually have an afternoon sports talk show in Northeast Wisconsin here on The Score called The Show. Which if you're ever in the Appleton, Green Bay, Oshkosh area, you'll be able to hear. That's weekdays 2 to 3. That's sort of my third job. And then I also host a fantasy football show on that radio station as well. So I keep very, very busy throughout the year.
Awesome. You're very busy man with 3 jobs and all the football going on in between.
Three
you
jobs, and
also
I'm not
have 20
particularly good at any one of them, which is really a testament to how good I am at fooling people, right?
Yeah, you could bounce around, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you have 21 radio awards, and that's something to be definitely proud of. So I'd say that you've definitely accomplished something in one of those jobs. And so can you share with us a few that you're most proud of?
Sure, absolutely. I would say the one I'm probably most proud of, I was actually working at a radio station in Oshkosh, which is probably, Oshkosh is about an hour south of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I was working at a radio station there, and I found out that Dennis Haskins, who you guys may remember as Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell, he was actually going on a barnstorming minor league baseball tour. And there's actually a minor league baseball team in where I live in Appleton. And he was coming there, and to drum up publicity, his PR people asked us if we wanted to do an interview with him. And I happened to be on the night he was available. I interviewed him, just thought it was just a whimsical type of throwaway thing. And unbeknownst to me, my program director submitted it for an award. And I can't, I'm trying to think of it. It either took first or second place at the Excellence in Journalism. It was a gold award at the Milwaukee Press Club, which is like, the Milwaukee Press Club is reserved for like the people covering the hard news, voter ID, social justice, whatever Trump and was getting into at the time. And they're giving me a gold award for this Dennis Haskins, Mr. Belding interview, which was hilarious to me. So that's probably the one I'm most proud of, because I never thought it stood a chance of winning. I also won you guys remember the show Man vs. Food? I think it was on the Travel Channel.
Yes.
So there was a couple of guys who were local in the Oshkosh, Appleton, Green Bay area, and they got to be on the Green Bay episode of the show. And I ended up interviewing them and talked about how they had to eat this massive cheeseburger in a half hour and all the bathroom issues they had afterwards. And that somehow won an award too. So I would say like that, the Mr. Belding thing, and then actually that was a Milwaukee Press Club award too. I think I won for the same. Oh no, best feature story was Local Man vs. Food. That was a second place one. So I was in a separate category for that one. But those two, I think, back to back showed me that you can shoot for much lower than the stars and still be recognized for excellence. So I think those two were the ones I'm most proud of.
So did you try the burger yourself?
No, but here's the thing. I know where they had this burger at, and I've eaten at this restaurant in Green Bay before. And I remember thinking, like, who in the hell would be so crazy to try that? And sure enough, these guys did. They lost the challenge, but still got on national, cable TV.
I'm a big foodie, and I really like, I have a big appetite. I'm not a small guy. And that show had a few. So at one point I worked down in Milpitas in the Bay Area, and before I moved to Oregon here, and there was a show that they did in San Jose, and it was a place called Iguanajuanas, and they had this like 17.5-inch long burrito, and it was like 2.5 or 3 pounds or something crazy, right? It was like a platter meal for like a party, and they did this thing. They were doing it in like Joey Chestnut, the hot dog king, right? He was there, and he ate this thing in like a minute.
Oh my God. How's that even physically, humanly possible?
Like, he's eating it. It's like his jaw just is like opening and closing as you see this burrito just kind of disappear like a pencil and a pencil sharpener. And it just vanished. It was like a minute. I think it was like a minute and like 3 seconds or something. It was something ridiculous.
Somewhere there's some like drunk scientist club that just creates these guys like Joey Chestnut and Tom Brady. Just they get hammered and they're like, oh, let's see if we can create somebody that can play competitive football at age 43 and win a Super Bowl. Let's have a guy who can ingest a 3-pound burrito in 60 seconds, And this is how they're not human. They're test tube metahuman cyborgs that we get to enjoy their works on Earth. And it's been awesome.
Absolutely. There's almost nothing like, I don't know. I think Chestnut we were talking yesterday with someone from Three Coast Sports with Luke, and we were talking about different goats of sports, and like maybe Joey Chestnut, we should have thrown his name in there as a goat of professional eating.
I don't know anybody who's I mean, like, I guess who was the other guy that they kicked out of the Nathan?
It was that little Asian kid. I
yeah.
his name.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. It was wasn't it the same guy? His name was at the bottom of the coffee mug that what's his name dropped in Usual Suspects. Chaz Palminteri or whatever. His character. You guys remember that Usual Suspects? Where he
love that movie.
He figures out Spacey verbal kint is
and
and
he's walking, his limp gets away.
Yeah, and like whatever the name the Japanese name on the bottom of the mug, that was the same. That was the same guy, and I can't remember what his name was.
Hiroshi or something. I think
was it Hiroshi?
Yeah, it's something along those
lines. Oh God, this is driving me nuts now. Oh,
it's going to be
Kobayashi. That was his name.
Kobayashi.
Oh.
Like Dumb and Dumber, Samsonite. Not even close.
I was way off.
All right. Well, back to football. Who's your favorite? Or I guess real quick before we get to football, what are your hobbies and interests outside of fantasy sports?
I like to get outdoors. I like to do some fishing every now and then. Obviously, I got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. I play sports and games and get outside with them. I'm going sturgeon spearing for the first time tomorrow, which is sort of a rite of passage in Wisconsin that you cut a hole in the ice at 6 a.m. and you literally stare down into the bottom of the river with a spear ready to spear a sturgeon in case one swims by, which almost never happens. So I'm looking forward to doing that for like 6 hours tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, like, it's just stuff like that. I guess like with 3 jobs, I don't get as much time to do fun stuff as much as I'd like. So I try to consume media while I'm working, and that's why I get involved in the SNLs, the Seinfelds, and the Office stuff of the world too.
Awesome. So you're in Wisconsin. Does that mean you're a Green Bay fan?
Yeah, I mean, they kick you out if you're not, pretty much. So there's plenty. I always think that, you just grow up rooting for the teams your dad or your mom or your parents, whoever rooted for. I think that's, true of 90% of people. And I mean, I'm obviously, I wouldn't say I'm a die-hard fan, but I'll tell you what, that Packers Buccaneers game in the NFC Championship, I would say that one is probably the second or third toughest I've ever taken a Packers loss before. It took me several days to get over that one. And quite frankly, I don't think I'm still over it.
Well, that makes 2 of us here, Eric, because I was born in Wisconsin.
Yeah, where were you born? What city?
I was Beloit, Wisconsin, just on the Illinois border there.
Home of the Snappers, right?
Yeah, the Beloit Snappers. That's right. Deep cut right there, Billy. Billy's like, okay. Yeah, they're a minor league baseball team. And actually, I went to a few Snappers games when I was a young boy. So, as we lived in Illinois for the first 7 years of my life. So, the closest hospital actually was Beloit Memorial. So that's why we root for the Packers. My mom and dad went to Marquette University in Milwaukee.
Golden Eagles. There you go.
The nice. Golden Eagles, formerly the Warriors.
The Warriors. Actually. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then my dad still has all the Warriors stuff.
Al McGuire back in the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was definitely good stuff.
The national championship. Dwayne Wade's his favorite player. Or was, I suppose. But enough Wisconsin talk. Favorite current NFL player?
I mean, I know he gets a bad rap, but I still like Aaron Rodgers quite a bit. Just the way he carries himself, the way he treats his teammates, most of them apparently. I know there's a couple out there, Greg Jennings, Jermichael Finley, that might have an axe to grind against him, but most people just love playing for him. I love what he's able to do on the field. I love what he does off of it. A lot of people think that, he's too arrogant, kind of a jerk, and I guess I don't get that vibe from him. I typically don't root for players all that much. I found out that when you start rooting for players that inevitably they'll let you down maybe off the field with some stuff criminally. And so I don't get wrapped up in players too much anymore. I'm usually about the name on the front of the jersey rather than the back, but Aaron Rodgers is probably my favorite current NFL player.
And past NFL players, does that mean you were also a Brett Favre fan?
I was, and I still am. I grew up. So my uncle is from Milwaukee. He actually moved out to the Bay Area, and he's a big Niners fan. And he would send me Niners stuff over the years. And I think the first NFL jersey I ever had was a Joe Montana one. And so I kind of rooted for the Niners because back then, the Packers weren't very good until you got to the Don Majkowski late 80s, early 90s teams. And then all of a sudden they started winning games again. And then with Brett Favre, back to back MVP The guy never missed a game. And certainly now that's a guy too, that, some of the stuff that came to light after he retired or towards the end of his, a tenure in the NFL certainly didn't make him the greatest guy in the world. And oh my God, the stories I could tell you that from what he was doing, in bars in Northeast Wisconsin here, is just crazy. We could do a whole podcast on that, but I still like him. I still root for him. I don't really have a dog in the fight of Favre versus Rodgers. I love them both.
It would probably put to shame what Tom Brady was doing down in Tampa this last week.
Do it. Heavens, what I don't want to get into it, but yeah, I mean, Brady. The thing with Brady is, you guys know, like he had a strawberry for the first time in his life on the Jimmy Fallon show or whatever it was, or Letterman. I don't know what it was.
He doesn't eat nightshades.
Yeah, no. And I feel like I saw that image of him coming off the boat. I'm like, that's exactly what I was like the first time I tasted alcohol, or like the first time I got drunk, where somebody had to hold me up and carry me away. That might've been the first time he actually had alcohol too. We don't know.
Didn't he say it was like avocado tequila?
Avocado tequila, yeah.
I don't even know if it's a real thing or if he's just, covering his bases, because he normally doesn't do that kind of stuff.
Well, I guarantee if there's an avocado tequila out there, TB12 makes it. So there's no doubt in my mind.
Distilleries in the back of the boat.
Oh yeah, for sure. And maybe that's where he gets his youth from. I don't know.
Seriously, he's just like the man that never ages, and his skills just remain as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So where did you get your start inside? Oh no, I skipped a question here. So besides your own, do you listen to any other podcasts? And if so, what are your 3 top favorites?
I do. I try, I wish I could had more time to listen to more podcasts, and I just don't. So it stinks because there's just only so much time in the day. I've listened to the Football Guys Audible for, my goodness, I don't even know how many years now. The better part of a decade. That's always been my favorite. I like the Draft Sharks podcast with Matt Schauf and Jared Smola and Adam Krautwurst. That's always one of my favorites as well. And typically anything that, because there's a zillion fantasy football podcasts out there, I typically like listening to the stuff more slated towards the high stakes players. The Lowdown with Kyle Leaf too. That's another really good one that I always try to catch whenever a new one drops there. Chasing the Helmet is another really good one with Scott Connor and Jay Reed. So I typically, in my limited time, I usually listen to the more high stakes podcasts. Not that I play FFPC, but I know some of these guys, and it gives me fodder to bring up stuff when we have guests on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and talk with FFPC players about it too. So I think those are the ones I like the best.
And how did you get your start inside the fantasy football industry? And how did you get to where you're at now?
Dave Gerzak, who is a co-founder of the FFPC, he's my boss for my day job and my e-commerce website job. And he started the FFPC along with Alex Kaganowski back in 2008. And oftentimes when I was supposed to be doing stuff for the website, he was saying, hey, FFPC needs you to do this. Can you do this? And I'll just pay you, for your normal job. I said, okay. Well, then it just transformed into me getting more and more responsibility. Then I was commissioning drafts and I was inputting rosters. I was answering emails, customer service stuff. And it's taken off since then. We've been doing the HSFF Hour podcast now for, this is season 9. I want to say we're coming up on episode 500. And that's something that we do weekly, since then, which has always been a huge part of it. The High Stakes Lowdown became part of my duties 6 years ago. And then obviously, anytime we're doing any, promotion for one of our main contests or anything like that, I usually pop on Sirius. So I just think that the whole thing is just really expanded over the years to the point where I have to say no to certain stuff with them. Because I don't have the time, but it just happened to be originally that my quote unquote boss was the same for the FFPC and for my day job.
That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Good start.
Total dumb luck. Anybody who's trying to carve out a niche in the industry, don't look at what I did because it was totally random. This never happens.
Well, if there was one piece of advice you could give to new podcasters like us, because we've started within the last year, We're only at episode 50, so not 500 quite there. What advice would you give to us, to content contributors who are just starting out?
Well, content is king, right? I mean, if you have great content, you're going to get a good listener base, because people are always attracted to the stuff that's the best. And so I think there's a lot of podcasts out there that are very information heavy, not very entertaining. Nobody's really going to want to listen to that. So I think it's almost more important. And I know that sounds like sacrilege, but I think it's almost more important to be entertaining than informative. And certainly people will come for the entertainment. They'll stay for the knowledge, but I think entertainment should come first. I also think that you should try to find your niche, right? Like, if somebody's like, well, what's your podcast about? Oh, fantasy football. Okay, great. There's 1,000 fantasy football podcasts out there. What makes yours different? So I think finding that niche is really important too. So if you're entertaining and you're providing something that nobody else, you can't get anywhere else, then I think you're doing it right. And it's a matter of time before all of a sudden you're becoming something really big.
Yeah, there's not very many podcasts where they get to watch me drink wine for an hour, because that's usually where I start. I open a bottle of wine. I usually have a couple glasses during the show. Bradley usually makes fun of me.
Here's the thing. Here's the problem with that. You got to start. You got to start open the bottle like a half hour before you go on. And so when you're starting, you're already still be like Spinal Tap. You're already starting at 11. So people don't have to fast forward to the first 30 minutes or wait 30 minutes for you to get all lubed up because you're already there. I think that's the whole idea with that.
There was one of their podcasts we had, I forget what it was, but I had I think it was, so I own a grocery store. That's my day job. And I think it was a buddy of ours. So a buddy of mine owns a brewery, and we did an exclusive beer for our store. And I was at the brewery drinking the beer all day, and Bradley and I had a podcast that night. Yikes. I get home and I'm like, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. So I pour myself a glass of wine, and as I'm later on after the podcast is over and I'm editing, because at this point I used to edit all of the audio myself, and I'm about halfway through the audio and I can start hearing myself slur. And I just start laughing. I'm like, oh, well, that's definitely not going away for the next 30 minutes of this podcast.
Yeah.
And Bradley's like, yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but
I'll just let him go.
That's gold. Let him go. That's what you do for sure. People
love
love that.
That's part of the content. That's part of the draw. That's the brand almost, if anything. Billy, you've become a brand. So Eric, you talked about that you don't play FFPC. Is that correct? Or did I?
No, you're right. We can't. We obviously don't play myself. Employees don't play in contests that we work for, essentially. So I don't play in FFPC or anything else out there as far as like high stakes stuff goes. I'm in a ton of private leagues, a lot of private dynasty leagues, and a couple of work leagues. That's about it, which is fun. It's so wild is last year, because of COVID, I found myself I was commissioning a lot more FFPC drafts online, being the draft facilitator, but I also found myself drafting more teams. And I think last year I was in 21 managed teams, like not best ball or anything like that. That was a new record for me. And I don't think it will be that high this year. 21 was plenty for me. And we'll try to amp that down this year, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll get the itch, May or June and already be in 15, and then it's a lost cause. I don't know.
Everybody always says they're going to cut back. Next thing you know, they've added 2 leagues the next year.
Yeah. No one ever cuts back. They just say they will. And yeah, I'm guilty of that.
I think I said I was going to cut back at like 13. I think I'm up to like 25 now. And
oh my God. Yeah. It's worse. It's like you have to say you're going to cut back so you don't join 40, right?
Yeah. Fantasy Football Anonymous.
Yeah. No kidding. Exactly.
Is there a favorite platform that you're on?
I mean, pretty much all my privately, like I was in Scott Fishbowl too. Like that was another one too. That's on MFL, and I that's pretty much where all my private ones are on. I think it's pretty cool for dynasty customization and stuff like that. So I'd say that's probably my favorite one. It's one I'm most familiar with. It's the one I've had the most experience on.
Well, what is your greatest competitive edge versus other fantasy football players and colleagues?
Man, if I knew that, I think I'd be winning more leagues. I don't know. I think I have the benefit of, and quite frankly, anybody who listens to the HSFF Hour has the same edge, but I feel like getting to talk to, people who've won 5 figures, 6 figures playing fantasy football over the years, the fact that I get to talk with a different person of that ilk every Friday certainly helps me flesh some things out. It's sort of like my own personal therapy session when I can go on there and talk to these guys. Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Have you tried this strategy? What are your feelings on this? Well, this guy says this. How do you react to that? And it helps me sort of get dialed in a little bit more. So I guess the fact that I have access to all these high stakes players would probably be my best edge, because I can. And I'll tell you another thing too. I'm not married to any particular strategy. Like, I'm very fungible. 1 year I'll be swearing by zero RB, and the next year I'll say I would never do that, and then I'll be on zero RB the next year. So I'm always switching it up, and I think it's important to be flexible. I mean, obviously you want to stand by your convictions, but when it comes down to it, it's all about drafting the best players, and whatever strategy it takes to do that, then you got to do that.
Yeah, there's a league that Billy and I are drafting right now as we speak. We're entering round 11 of the startup, and it's a 2 super flex and like 9 flex positions league.
Oh my God.
No positionals.
No positions except for those 2 super flexes at the end. And we have not yet drafted a running back.
No,
God bless you guys. Wow. that is going to be fun. Is it a best ball or is it a managed one?
No, it's a managed dynasty league.
Dynasty.
You'll be fine. There's some James Robinson that's going to lead you guys to victory, like the 2021 version.
Well, it's full PPR, and it's actually 1.75 tight end premium. So there's, like we said, there's no running back's position. It's just all flex position. So
hold on. So through 11 rounds, how many tight ends do you have right now?
I've been trying to get my second one for 2 rounds now, and Bradley's put his foot down. So it's coming around on the turn here.
No, hold on. So you have no running backs. You have 1 tight end. Are you just loaded up on quarterbacks and wide receivers then?
Yep, exactly, all the way through.
And the rest are wide receivers.
The old pitch and catch approach, essentially.
Yep, I think our wide receiver 6 is like Michael Gallup.
Oh, man, that is going to be a fun league to talk. Well, you guys are co-managing that, so that'll be a lot of fun throughout the season to have those conversations.
It's just a completely different strategy. We didn't go in with like, oh, we're not going to draft running backs at all. But it's just how it fell to us. Kyler Murray off the board and a super flex at the start, and then we got Darren Waller later. And I don't know, it's just Tyreek Hill up there.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill was like the end of round 2. It was just crazy.
I think that's important. That, I think the people who have come on my show to talk about how they won $500,000, and it's like, well, how did you put together this team? Well, I didn't really go in with any preconceived notions where I have to have this guy, or I have to have this many at this position by this point in the draft. They just kind of, and I know this sounds cliche, but they let the draft come to them. And I think sometimes not going in with the strategy is actually a strategy, and that's sometimes where you get the best value.
It is. I'm a value-based drafter myself, and in FFPC and Sleeper and in MFL, whatever platform I'm on, I'm a firm believer in value-based drafting. And I mean, when the best player on the board is a wide receiver and you're around 9, you're continuing to draft wide receivers. Luckily, the format allows for it, because if we were like an FFPC format, we'd be screwed right now. But the fact that the format is allowing for it, I think it's actually going to take a great advantage, because all these players we have youth, and in dynasty wide receivers are have a lot more longevity than these running backs as well. So it's another piece that we don't have to worry about. I
think we're getting to the point where people are almost overvaluing wide receivers in dynasty too. Like they ask for like in trades, and they ask for the moon. And sometimes I think you get some really good, like you guys will see, where you might see in this draft, you might get some pretty good deals on running back too.
Yeah, we'll see if there's maybe even some. I mean, we're entering. We just started round 11, and there's players like Kenyon Drake, James Conner, and Zach.
Oh my God, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Damian Harris is still on the board. Like, there are still quality running backs who may have starting positions next year and not drafted yet. So we'll see. Okay, back to the questions. So you talked to us about having that advantage of picking the brains of some of the biggest winning players and some of the smartest players out there. What's what's your Achilles heel when it comes to fantasy football?
My Achilles heel. All right. So I know I just said you should never go into a draft and be rigid, right? But I think one of the things I've been too rigid with over the years, and pretty much 80% of my leagues are one QB, but waiting on quarterback. And sometimes it works out years, like this year when I had Aaron Rodgers as my starting quarterback in a lot of leagues because everybody else let him fall. And then other leagues it doesn't work out. Other years it doesn't work out where, if you miss out on Kyler Murray or Patrick Mahomes or one of these quarterbacks that was going super early. Dak Prescott for the first few weeks this season was certainly on that path. Sometimes that can cost you too. So I think sometimes I build depth at running back and receiver to the detriment of being elite at quarterback. And I know it's cost me leagues over the years. That's probably my biggest weakness.
We just had a listener tell me that we're getting my glass is getting low.
Mine is too, but I have craft beer, so it's different than wine.
Oh, that's outstanding. Thanks for listening, Jamie. All right, so can you walk us through your typical fantasy football week? What does it look like?
I would say so Tuesdays is usually when I do 2 podcasts in season. Tuesdays are normally when I make sure that I'm getting the questions for the interview for whoever we're having on the show that week. Tuesday, I'm prepping those questions. I'm getting to them, getting to our interviewees so they have 2 or 3 days to look it over. That's typically when I'm trying to find my guests for the following week. And then Tuesdays actually is the first time. Guys, I don't know about you. I didn't check live scoring at all this year until like the final, weeks, like the championship weeks. Then I had to. But I didn't check. I didn't know how I did in any of my leagues until Tuesday after all the games were played, or sometimes, Wednesday or Thursday when the games get moved back. And then I would check to see how I did. So that was part of my Tuesday regimen as well. Wednesday is obviously waiver day, submitting blind bids up the wazoo Wednesday night. That's a huge time suck. And then, Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, I'll typically get my lineups all set before the Thursday night game. Friday, I host the show, the HSFF Hour Friday Night Live. Though the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown is typically, we record that usually Tuesday or Wednesday. In season, it's usually Monday or Tuesday because no high stakes player wants to do a podcast on Wednesday night waiver bid night. That's just not happening.
Way too much going on.
Right, exactly. So then Friday night's the live show. Saturday's sort of a day off, maybe with the family, maybe checking out some college football that day. And that's sort of like where I just kind of take it easy. And then obviously Sunday, you're submitting lineups right up until the 1 o'clock start. And then if my wife allows, then I'm watching football the next 11 hours. But that's typically in season how it is for me.
So there we go.
Go ahead,
we're good. So do you write articles? If so, do you have a favorite one? If you don't write articles, do you have a favorite interview that you've done? I know you've talked about the ones with the award-winning interviews, but is there any one that's special to your heart?
I don't write articles. I used to actually for acmepackingcompany.com, which is sort of the SB Nation Green Bay Packers fan site. And they asked me to do some work there just from a fantasy angle. I did that for a couple years. It wasn't for me. God bless the people who write articles. I know I enjoy reading them, but I am no longer writing, thank God. But I would say as far as, we've had some pretty good guests over the years on the HSFF Hour that we've been able to interview. Evan Silva has come on our program, David Dodds, Corey Parson from Sports Illustrated. We had Sharkandrick West. You guys remember Sharkandrick West, the old Chiefs running? He came on when my co-host actually just tweeted at it. He mentioned him. This is before West was just got done with his pro day at Abilene Christian or whatever. And my co-host just mentioned him in Twitter talking about, hey, we should look at this guy. Here is, his 40, here's his bench, whatever. And then Sharkandrick West retweeted him and said, actually, my 40 was this. It was 0.2 of a second quick. And
correction,
so,
Baki.
Yeah, exactly. And so then we're like, hey, would you ever like to come on our show? And he said, sure. And so we had him on. And then he sort of big timed us after that when he got the job with the Chiefs. But it was still a fun interview. We've had an Olympian on our show, Adrian Blinko, who was a distance runner for the 2008 New Zealand team. He actually plays FFPC. We had him come on one time. He actually did. He finished with a top 10 team overall. And this was when he was on a plane flying back from the United States to New Zealand. He did the draft on the plane. It was the last one of the season, and he ended up having a really hell of a good year because of it. So I think those are the interviews that have stood out to me. We actually just had David Taylor, who was the 2018 world champion freestyle wrestler. He plays FFPC. We had him on earlier in this offseason too. He was a fun, just to get all these different people from different walks of life on the show has really been a blessing.
Well, for time's sake, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit here because I know you have your podcast here at 6:00. So I want to get into the FFPC a little bit more. So if you don't mind, what is the FFPC? What does it offer to the fantasy football community? And, I've been playing FFPC, but Bradley, for instance, is going to be new to FFPC next year. And I just want today our listeners, there's a wide mix here. Some have played, some haven't played. So give everybody the lowdown.
The FFPC was founded in 2008 during the heyday, really, of the World Championship of Fantasy Football. And some of the high-stakes players who our founders were at the time playing in the WCOF didn't really necessarily like the direction that they saw coming with the WCOF. And so they started small with the FFPC, and just as another high-stakes main event outlet that people could play. And it's just been growing ever since. And after catering to the high stakes players for 5-6 years or whatever it was, we kind of wanted to open it up to just season long fantasy football in general. And then we had entry fees starting, instead of entry fees starting at $350, we had it starting at $35. And we took on Dynasty after that. We've been doing Dynasty leagues for the last 5-6 years, never had one fold. That's been awesome. So what makes the FFPC great is it's a really cool community of a lot of people. I hesitate to call them experts. Yeah, they know a lot of stuff, but it's just fantasy football enthusiasts that get together and play. And a lot of people have made some lifelong friendships in this. And I just think that it's a cool place to play fantasy football. And certainly if you want to be part of it, we'd welcome you in with open arms. And we've continued to grow year after year. It's been a lot of fun. And if you're looking for a contest that's run by, again, Alex and Dave don't play FFPC, but they come from a high stakes player's background. I mean, how many high stakes players run national competitions or game operators at all? And I think that's, the perspective that they bring to running the events and running the drafts, I think is pretty unique.
All right. So one of the first questions that some of our listeners might ask is this gambling? Like, is FFPC considered gambling?
Well, I'll tell you this: we have had plenty of discussions, and we have to abide by plenty of legislation that was put forward by different states, having conversations with gaming commissions. In New York, New Jersey, Nevada, wherever it is, all over the country. So. What I wouldn't classify it as gambling. I think there's other people that would probably classify what we do as gambling. But I think when you're talking about drafting a team, managing its roster, managing lineups, I think that there's a whole lot of skill in that rather than, just picking some numbers out of a ping pong machine or whatever. To me, that's gambling. This, I think, is something completely different.
I'd tell people it's not gambling when the same people into the top year after year after year. There's a lot of skill involved.
There's a lot of skill involved. Yes.
So what about prizes? Players' money safe at the FFPC?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that we did from the get-go. It was making sure that we had all the players' funds in escrow, and that we've all seen the horror stories like of contests over the years. Thankfully not too recently, which hopefully it's a thing of the past. But not paying out, because they don't have the money at the end of the season, which is really a travesty. But that was one of the things that when the FFPC got started, we were like, okay, enough of that nonsense. Here's escrow. Here's the attorney. You want to contact him to verify the money's in there, go right ahead. He can provide proof. And we do that every single year to make sure that the players, the prize money is never mixed in with operating money ever.
So now the legal jargon's out of the way. Let's discuss the team here. And you guys have a fantastic team. So who, other than yourself, who's a part of this team and what does everybody do?
I think a lot of, and then I guess this is a testament to what people view us as. I think they view us, not they, but I think a lot of people out there view us as like, FanDuel or DraftKings, where we have all this millions upon millions of venture capital money and all these employees and these lush, posh offices in Manhattan and everything like that. And we don't have that. We have our two co-founders. We have our full-time customer service rep, Chris Lambert, who is awesome. She's actually fantastic. She used to work for WCOF and she came over to the FFPC, and that's really when the FFPC took off because of how great she was. We have Mike Petrop, who came on, I want to say like 4 years ago, when all the legalese was coming out and all the legislation about fantasy sports was coming out. He is our full-time legal expert, legal analyst, and we keep him on. He's been great too. And then there's me, and that's pretty much it. We'll have different online commissioners during draft season that will work as facilitators for the drafts, but that's all they do. I would say we basically have two owners, two full-time people, and then me, who's basically part-time, and that's it.
All right. So you described your position, and how long have you been? I know that you started just like they started paying you a little bit. You mentioned that earlier, and then eventually became in the fold. But how long have you been full-time in FFPC?
I would hesitate. Like full-time is not a qualifier. It's definitely full-time in summer. I would say from July to mid-September I am working 80-hour weeks with both, the two main jobs and then my radio gig. But I would say, like, as far as my current duties, I've probably been doing that for at least 7-8 years or so, with FFPC.
Right. And so the FFPC to me is the gold standard for high stakes leagues. It truly is. And there's a lot of names that have been thrown around here in tonight's podcast. And, but what are your top 3 favorite formats to play outside the FFPC?
I would say like the old traditional, like the 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 receiver, tight end, kicker, defense. I always love playing with kickers and defenses. I know I'm a dinosaur when it comes to that. But I still love it. And so I would like, just the the traditional non-tight end premium format. I like quite a bit. I do like, like when you get into the deep, like the Scott Fishbowl one is pretty interesting, where you can have all the different flexes, where you can have a wide receiver heavy lineup. You can have a running back heavy lineup. I like playing around with that, sort of constantly sussing out your roster to maximize your fantasy potential. And maybe a wide receiver team becomes a running back team. I like that as well. But I typically, the thing is like, and I'm 41 now, so maybe I'm just too set in my ways. But once I find a format that I like playing in, I typically I'm not too adventurous in trying to find new ones. Like I'll just stick with that. And I know I'll never master it, but I know I can get better at it the more I play. So I would say that would probably be my answer to that.
All right. Can you walk us through the 2 flagship tournaments, the main event and the FBG? Like how many entries per each, payouts, format, roster size, starting rosters, etc. for both of those? We'll start with the main event. Can you describe that for us? Yeah,
and I'll tell you this right now. As far as the lineups go, they're identical. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 2 flexes, tight end, kicker, defense. That as long as we've had FFPC, that's always been the standard lineup. The main event, and while we haven't announced anything official yet as far as 2021 goes for it, I can tell you what we did last year was a $500,000 grand prize. We had a prize pool of over $3 million, and you can get essentially, you're paying the better part of $2,000 for your first team, whether you're drafting live in Las Vegas with us or whether you were drafting online. But then each additional team is only $1,500 after that. So the additional team discount is really what made it for people. We pay deep. It's not something where we only want to pay like the top 10 or 20 finishers. We want to go deeper than that. The main event paid down to 125 spots last year as well. So even if you finished outside the top 100, you're still bringing home at least $1,000 in, which is something good that we're proud of.
You also have another format called Pros versus Joes. Can you tell our listeners and those watching what that entails?
Yeah, this is a fun one. Basically, we added a league this year. It's 7 closed 12-team leagues, and each of those 7 leagues feature 6 FFPC Joes and then 6 industry pros. The Joes are selected randomly for anyone who has either paid their team in full or put their deposit down on their main event team that year. And then we just have a random drawing and we'll pull out the Joes for that competition. And then they're set up against industry pros. This past year we did a best ball slim format, which was 18 rounds, no kickers, no defenses, no lineup management throughout the season. And then if you are lucky enough to win your individual pros versus Joes league, you get a free entry into the main event the following year. So we gave away 7 free main event teams for that. And that's good for whether you're a Joe or a pro. And I think it creates a lot of content for those pros. It creates a lot of interest in the FFPC when we have a contest like that. We always broadcast all those drafts live on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and on YouTube as well. So it gets a lot of people, it gets the juices flowing essentially. I mean, we usually do it at the end of July, early August. And, then people are like, okay, now pros versus Joes happen. It's draft season. Let's get in there and get some teams going.
Is there an official tally, pros versus Joes? Who's won more?
There is. And Darren Armani, who runs the Fantasy Mojo website, fantasymojo.com. Yep. He is the godfather of the pros versus Joes competition. So if there is an answer to that, he would have it at Fantasy Mojo. I know that, it's different every year because we'll get a lot of the same pros in every year. A decent amount. There's always some change over there, but you always get new Joes in pretty much every single year. The Joe carryover is probably like maybe 5% from year to year, maybe 10%. So it's difficult for any Joes to have a long-standing dominance in the field. But I know there's like Sigmund Bloom, I think, from Football Guys. Darren said that he was the all-time winningest pros versus Joes competitor. And that's because, he's usually in it every year, whereas some of the Joes aren't. But typically, and I'm not catering towards our audience here, typically the Joes do win more than the pros because of the familiarity of the FFPC scoring system, the FFPC lineups, the FFPC slim builds. The pros aren't always that familiar with it. So I think that's the reason the Joes usually have the upper hand.
Yeah, we interviewed Abib, who won back. And we talked about, tips and tricks, and he gave his advice. And my one piece was to everybody was read your format, right? Because my very first year at FFPC, I didn't read that you couldn't do 0 fab bids. So it was like week 8, and I'm at 0 fab.
Oh, yeah, that sucks. Yeah, that happened to me this year too.
That's wasted money on this year, but hey, but you learn and you move on, right?
Yes, exactly. And if there's anybody to take advice from, it's Abib Egbatova. How many horseshoes does that guy have? Holy cow. You win back-to-back 6-figure grand prizes. I just hope it doesn't hurt signups for the Football Guys Players Championship next year. Like, well, this guy wins it every year. Why would I join it and try to win 6 figures when I know this guy is? But really incredible stuff. I mean, that's unprecedented stuff in the high stake.
I don't think we're ever going to see it again.
We shouldn't. I hope we don't, for God's sake. That would be terrible. But I mean, like, you're talking about like the WCOF was founded 20 years ago, and nothing like this has even come close to happening. It's crazy, especially when you consider the Football Guys Players Championship. I mean, he beat out like 8,000 plus teams last year. He beat out almost 11,000 this year. Unbelievable.
Yeah, he's pretty much the Tom Brady of the FFPC,
yeah,
and
exactly.
Everybody wants him to lose now.
God,
we love you, B. We're kidding.
If he's doing this like late in his career, when he's 70 or something, and he's still crushing it, he really would be the Tom Brady then.
That's so great. So we've talked about the FFPC and how the structure of the rosters and the different formats are. So I'm assuming leagues are drafted online. Billy showed me some of those that are drafted online. You did mention about Las Vegas being drafted offline. Is that right?
Yeah, we always throw a live event in Las Vegas every year. We've had it at Caesar's Palace before. We've had it at the Rio. Currently, last year we had to adjust a little bit because of the city ordinance rules in Las Vegas, and we had to divide it up into different places. But Planet Hollywood has sort of been our home the last several years. I'm sure we'll be at Planet Hollywood again this year. But that is for our main event. Some of our main events are live. We'll have plenty of live best balls out there. We have a couple of live auctions that go on out there, and then our more higher ticket leagues, our $3,000 entry varsity leagues are held live out there. Our $5,000 big payback leagues are held out there, and then our $10,000 high society league is held out there as well. Those are all live. So yeah, the most of the drafts are online, but we do have a live element the weekend of week 1 for the NFL season.
And other than commodity, is there any perks that come with the live draft versus online draft?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Vegas is, people get out there and do a lot of stuff that they only get a chance to once a year. I know there's a lot of guys who go golfing. There's plenty of guys who go partying. Obviously, watching the games in the sports book, week 1 is great. If you draft live with us at the FFPC, there's bar service right next to your draft tables. We always kick in a free meal catered in by the casino for every live draft as well. So I mean, you do pay a little bit more to draft live, but the whole experience of drafting live with all these other people coming in, now we used to say from around the country, now it's all over the world that come in and draft. It's pretty cool. We get an interesting mix of people out there, and a lot of these guys and women too. They only get to see each other once a year, and it's in Vegas to draft with the FFPC. That's always fun.
Well, last question here, just before we let you go, and we'll conclude this podcast here. Are there any? So we talked all the high stakes. Are there any classic games on FFPC?
For as far as like
low stakes, I should say.
A lower stake. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can do I said, we have 30 leagues starting at $35 if you want to manage like a 20-round draft. If you want to manage a 20-man roster throughout the season for $35, you can. A lot of people in preparation for the Football Guys Players Championship or the main event will do a bunch of $35 best balls over the course of the summer to sort of warm up to it, get a feel for it. And then you don't have to manage those. That's obviously a set it and forget it format too. So whether you want to go in big, whether you want to start small, I mean, we have entry fees, $35, $77, $150, $250, $350, $750, $1,250, $1,625, $5,000, $10,000. I mean, there really is a price point for every budget.
Well, before we end the show, I'd like to say thank you again for joining us tonight, Balky. It was great to have you on the show. And would you like to give any shout outs or closing comments here?
Well, I'll just give a shout out to all the FFPC players playing the FFPC, because without them, it never would have grown into being something that it is today. And we just appreciate their continued support and appreciate everything they do. And I look forward to another successful 2021. Oh, we'll be on to the NFL draft here shortly, fellas. It's creeping up on us. Draft season is creeping up on us.
I've already started drafting best balls on FFPC.
Good for you. And those are always the January, February best balls, man. Those are the ones you look back on in September and say, oh my God, how did I get this team?
It really is. You get some crazy value, or otherwise sometimes you look back and be like, what was I thinking?
I remember so many people, you remember when the whole Tyreek Hill suspension thing was and he was dropping to like the 8th round, the 9th round or whatever it was. And everybody was convinced, oh my God, you got Tyreek Hill in the 8th round or 9th round. You already won it. Nobody else is making the championship round. And then like the top 5 or 10 teams in like the Football Guys contest that year, none of them had Tyreek Hill. And so, I mean, it's wild to see, because you still gotta, you can get lucky and that helps, but you still got to manage the team. You still got to do the rest of the draft right.
It's so true. Well, everybody, that's it. Thank you for watching and listening to our FFPC podcast tonight with Eric Balkman. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Eric Balkman. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter at FFFanalyst, at FFMusio, at FFStalder, or on Facebook at Fantasy Football Fanalists. Please subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels at FF Fanalists, or simply go to our website to find every social button that we just mentioned at fffanalist.com, where you can find articles, rankings, DFS content, and more. Make sure to tune in next Friday, February 19th at 5 p.m. for our 2020 running back consensus rankings recap with Bradley and I. We will see you all next week. Thanks for joining, and good night.